Hey everybody, it's Will with Schedulefly, and very, very excited this morning to be speaking to Joanne Dragonowski. She's up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and has a really neat story, a family business that goes back really since 1951 that her parents initially started with a pizza recipe, and it's now grown, and her parents have passed, but she and her siblings run Dragonetti's, ZA 51, Taverna Grill, and they also have a seasonal business, the Enchanted Inn, and a campground. So she's a very busy lady, and it was very nice for her to take time to do this. So thank you, Joanne.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, it's my pleasure.
So you are, so you're there in Eau Claire, and we caught you this morning before you're heading up to the seasonal business, to the Enchanted Inn. But give me tell me a little bit about the backstory. I know your parents were immigrants, and they came over here, if I remember correctly, in maybe 36, but they started the business around 1951. Is that right?
That's correct. They both came from families who came over from Europe. My mom with Italian heritage, and my dad with Polish, German, Russian. So they both at that time lived in Chicago, had a family of 5, and my mom worked in a restaurant. She was a server at Stouffer's at the time, and my dad worked with family in a paint store. And they basically had a dream, mostly my dad's dream, convinced my mom to move up north to the wilderness and start a life, go to the lake and bring the family and get out of the city and just go live with nature. So they did that. They loaded up the truck, and there's lots of fun stories. Not fun. I mean, they had a fire along the way. So Dad's brother was smoking a cigarette, and it flew out the window and in and caught the trailer on fire, and all their clothes burned and stuff like that. But anyway, so 1951, they bought this place. It was at that time the summer home of the Police Commissioner of Chicago. So it had a big house on a lake, and it was not very well, didn't have a great furnace, and but they built fires and did what they did, and slowly over time turned it into like a resort. They rented out cabins, and my mom would cook, and they'd take in some deer hunters in the winter and did what they could to kind of make a living and a life, and eventually had this, came up with this pizza recipe for this great dough. And I remember her still rolling it out by hand with a rolling pin. And that's what they started this life. And we all grew up in the restaurant business then, and we're blessed to have those tools and that seed to make our own living. And they both passed, as you mentioned, but we're still kicking, and we're feeding people, and we're in the hospitality business, and we love it.
So you grew up around it. You were there at the inn. Is it something that you always knew you do, or did you? A lot of people I talk to that grow up in the business, they go out and do something different for a while, but they seem to be drawn back to it. And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of nailed it. When I went to high school up there in that area. Grew up. My younger brother, and I, John, came along after. We're the last 2 of 7 kids. We were born up there. And having grown up in the business, I was pretty sure, kind of being a little bit of a cocky young lady, that I just wanted nothing to do with restaurants. I was going to use my head and not my back. So I moved to Eau Claire and went to school, went to the university, UW Eau Claire, and got a degree in accounting. And I did that, and I worked for about a year in an accounting firm, and I just decided, I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. I mean, I loved the education, but I didn't want to be in a cubicle, and I just thought, no. So what else did I know? And I knew restaurants. So I contacted the family. We were obviously always in touch, and I said, well, I'm down here in Eau Claire, and there's really not an Italian restaurant. So what do you think about maybe pointing it south a little bit? And at that point, my dad had passed, but my mom was still alive. And so she was, everybody was kind of on board with that, because winters were really tough up there. We had a good living, but it was pretty seasonal. It's up way up north and north of Hayward area. So we slowly moved to Eau Claire, opened our first restaurant, and that was Dragonetti's.
Okay, so that was 81, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so
excuse me.
No, yeah. So that was so your mom was still involved, and then Claudia, your sister, and John, your brother. Is that the other two?
Correct.
Okay. So
yes.
You guys got now. Was it the same pizza recipe that your folks had come up with?
Yep, exactly. We used that recipe, and there's a little bit more backstory. My parents started up there in 51, and 10 years later, in 1961, they opened a restaurant that's between up north and Eau Claire. It's in the town called Rice Lake. And that's where they kind of bought an old store and turned it into a pizzeria. Now today, at that time, my parents started running it, and then two of my older brothers, took over. And one still runs it. And so what we did, that was more of a pizzeria called Drag's Pizzarama, actually, at the time. And so when we opened the Eau Claire restaurant, we tried to kind of copy that same concept. Rice Lake is a little town. It was, the place is on Main Street. It was, it worked beautifully. It's still in existence. They still run it. But we tried to copy it in Eau Claire, and we just... the cookie cutter thing didn't work. We kind of struggled the first 2-3 years. We struggled a lot. It was really tough. And so we started to kind of listen to our customers and look at the different climate that we had in Eau Claire. It was a bigger metropolitan area. The tastes were different. We kept that pizza the same, but we built a menu around it that was more carefully prepared pasta dishes and different offerings that were a little bit more upscale around it. And that's when things started to take off. And now it's been 37 years. So that's worked for us. Yeah. But yeah, pizza's the core. That's the hallmark thing.
So, yeah, I was going to say 37 years is just such a amazing, inspiring thing in the restaurant business. So you, and what y'all did early there is such a critical part, that really is the line between success and failure, I think, are one of the lines in the business is coming in with what you thought was going to work. It wasn't quite working, but you were able to tinker and make adjustments and listen and thoughtfully think about what you could do to make changes. And here you 37 years later, that's so awesome.
Right.
So
yeah, it was a hard lesson.
I bet. But congrats on figuring that out, because a lot of folks, that's some folks maybe through being stubborn, or some folks through just not really paying enough attention or whatever, aren't able to do that, and that can be the difference. So here you are 37 years later. I want to unpack a little bit of this. What's well, first of all, because if you've done it this long, there must be some sort of core foundational principles and philosophies that you've built this business on that haven't changed over 37 years, and there's probably some things that have. So tell me about the things that have not changed, that you're still doing today, that you've been doing all along.
I think the core, the most important core thing, as we've learned and expanded, is first of all, that recipe, obviously, and that just translates into consistency. People want, and we, try to wrap that into our culture and our training and everything, and that people want that consistency. If they come on a Monday and then they come and they have whatever it is, their favorite dish or their favorite pizza, and then they come back on a Thursday, it's got to be exactly the same. It's got to be the same no matter who made it, who put it together. And from time to time, we'll see that things get out of kink. Sometimes, especially as things grow, you might get someone new to the team that worked elsewhere, made pizzas at a mainstream pizza place or something, and they're used to doing something a certain way. So you kind of have to go, okay, we get it. We understand you want to maybe put your spin on it, but you can't. We got to keep it consistent, and here's why. So the consistency is really the number one thing. Using really high quality ingredients. We don't scrimp. We still make our own sausage meat from scratch. We buy the meat at a local butcher. And if we notice that the mixture's getting, it's the fat, it's a little bit the ratio, if it's 80-20, if that seems to be changing, or if all of a sudden it's something else, you want it lean but not too lean, because that's where your flavor is. But if it gets too fatty, then you get a greasy pizza, so you got to constantly, and the cheese might change, the fat content in the cheese seasonally, because the cows are producing their milk differently. It's all kind of a keep attention to it and keep an eye on it, and consistency is number one.
Yeah, consistency and just staying focused on the basics and just nailing them every time, which can be challenging to do for sure, especially over decades like that. And people coming and going. Well, tell me about the people that are a part of this, and how do you get people dialed into focusing on that consistency?
Well, we do a lot of, it was a lot easier when we all worked physically in one location, because we were all there all the time. And as we expanded, of course, that was our biggest challenge, was how do you keep that? So it all comes down to learning to put everything in writing. We have, now that we've grown, we have a young man that we call the Pizza Czar. And he's our, if we notice, like we just did this last week at Drags, we call it the mothership. We had a longtime customer who came in and said to our manager on duty, I'm noticing that the pizza's it's not as consistent as it always is. And so we're like, okay, red flag, let's bring the Pizza Czar in. So the Pizza Czar came back and did a little lesson for everybody. Let's come back to center. Let's all focus, and here's how we make a pizza. Here's what goes on. Here's the pattern. Here's to make sure if you get multiple ingredients, you're not scrimping. Putting things in writing, having written procedures, but then a physical presence of someone who comes in, has earned this position, and can give everybody a little bit of a little recheck.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And he loves it. He takes it very seriously, and does a great job.
Tell me, and I know and you've got several other places as well. What has been, with as you've grown, you must have had to have hired people that, because you and your siblings own the businesses, so they're so critically important to you. They're, these are your babies. And like you said, when you're there all the time, it's one thing, but when you're moving around, and probably, by the way, you mentioned you didn't want to use your back, you wanted to use your mind. Am I right that maybe nowadays you're using your mind a little bit more as y'all have grown?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And you've heard it, everyone say work on your business, not in your business, and you have to work in. There's plenty of times when I end up going in and doing, physically being there because of staffing or an emergency or whatever.
Yeah.
But for sure, when the bigger, the more you want to scale, the more, and I'm grateful for my accounting background, because that's really helped, of course.
Yeah.
It does. And it's so important. That's the other thing. As much as you don't want to monetize things, the only way it's going to work is if you make more than you spend.
Right.
That's the really bottom line secret. So you got to take time, and especially I see so many owners. I'm really active with the Wisconsin Restaurant Association.
Okay.
And I see so many people starting out who are so busy with their head down, cranking out the stuff, which you got to do, but you got to look up every now and then and step back and look at your numbers and figure out where the sweet spot is, and are you really making money on this item, or are you doing something that you shouldn't be doing? And that's just super, super important too.
Do you having been in the business for so long and being a part of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, do you work with folks that are up and coming? Are you an advisor to anybody or a mentor, or
all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually on the executive board, so we try to help. That's what we do. We're a resource for people that want to start in the business, or they're in the middle of being in business and they're running into challenges. And I'm always happy to do that. I love doing that. And sometimes, people have never been in this business and they have this dream of opening a restaurant.
Hmm.
And sometimes you're giving them a little dose of reality. It's not all. I always laugh. Everyone goes, "Oh, you got such a glamorous business." I go, "Yeah, we sit around and the Brinks truck backs up and we load the money in the back and it goes to the bank and we have cocktails and we just, it's not like that. It's it's the POS system just went down. I did that the other day twice. I mean, I was running in and trying to in the middle of something. Our son plays baseball. Okay, I got to go, but that's what happens.
Yeah, the idea of the restaurant business and the reality can be very, very different. I've learned for a lot of folks, but you clearly have it in your. I mean, you have it in your blood, and you love what you do, and that's very apparent. Do you tell me about? Well, first of all, let me ask you this: you've got several concepts. Why diversify versus taking the one concept and replicating it elsewhere? Or are they all in the same area?
Well, no, that's kind of a good question. That's a very good question, actually. The first one, we evolved to that. It was and it's like the mothership is a full service dinner only, kind of an Italian supper club almost. The second location, we just kind of fell into it. It's a smaller thing. It had a big bar and an open area, and it just seemed to be more real casual. So we made that that's Taverna. That we made that like a kind of a sports bar, but it started out where it was going to be a sports bar, but you'd get better than you expected food at a sports bar, and if you wanted to have a decent glass of wine, you could get that instead of just okay, we've got this house wine, and you have no choices. And if you wanted a decent beer, if you wanted craft beer or something, you could do that. But it was still affordable, but you had more variety than you'd expect at a sports bar. But it had a little bit of an Italian flair. We put flatbreads in there, which is basically our pizza, but we shaped it oval, and it became more of an individual size. Instead of having all the options with sizes as you did at the big restaurant, it was more of a personalized thing. And then the third one, ZA 51, was my sister Claudia. Always, we call in our family, we shorten pizza, we call it ZA. Let's have a ZA or whatever. And so that was kind of her brainchild, honestly. She just, had there was this development coming in this area. Altoona is right next to Eau Claire, and the city of Altoona was pretty much a conceptualized development with the river surrounds it, and they had a little stream, and it was a park, so you could bring your kids, and you could be out on your bike or whatever and stop. It's along the bike trail. A nice mixture of residential and business. And she was like, I just really love what that sounds like. We should think about opening another place. And John and I kind of looked at her and said, what? But then we all got in the car and we drove out there, and it's only not even a mile away from Dragonetti's North. It's literally the next exit off the highway. But we loved the area, and so then we thought, what can we do that's more pizza focused, but it fits in with that sort of environment? And so that's how we came up with the open concept. The Pizza Czar is right behind there. You can see everything. You're right there watching them do everything. And you can sit at the bar and have a cocktail, and you're right there. So more casual, but yet, upscale casual, maybe is the word. I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay.
We started out thinking it would be quick service, and then we realized that we were not going to hit the mark with that. We just needed to go back to a full service restaurant. So that's how that came. So we are kind of a little bit all over the place, but I think we are most comfortable with and of course the times change, people's dining habits are changing and everything. So this latest version, I think, is the most in tune with what people really want right now.
Gotcha. ZA 51.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 51 is obviously because we started in 1951. So it's kind of a tribute to our parents and, that's how we came up with ZA 51.
Well, habits are changing, and that's why I just find it so. I love the idea of a place, especially if going back to Dragonetti's. It's been there for 37 years. Um, are there things about Dragonetti's that have changed, or are changing, or will change based on, or do people always, in a community like that, or in any community, are families, like you said, they're looking for consistency in the food, but a lot of times I think they're just looking for consistency and just a place to be and something that they've grown up going to. And I would imagine you serve people that have been coming there for, multiple generations now.
Oh, exactly. It's very true. We have some of the same customers, and it's more, like I said, more supper clubby, but we have a lounge and an outdoor deck. And I do see over time, we've all observed that people are more casual with their habits. So, we have people that will come in 2-3 times a week, but they are more of our kind of lounge. Nobody needs to come and be dressed up at all. But I think that in general, for the just society, people's dining habit, they're more convenience oriented, that kind of thing. I think people want to come in and grab a bite. It's casual. So we're looking at that. We're looking at accommodating that and focusing more in those areas, because that's what people seem to want.
You mentioned, sort of the difference between, people thinking they want to open a restaurant and they have a dream, and then helping them understand the realities of that. What let me ask you this. What is it that you love most about what you do?
When it comes down to it, we're in the hospitality business. And what I love about it is, well, a couple of things. Over the years, we've had some amazing people we've worked with. I mean, and it's really, really a cool thing when someone comes in and, they worked for you 20 years ago. And now they've got their kids in tow, and they're like, you know what, you were one of my best employers, or whatever. I'm not saying I'm tooting my horn, but it's such a compliment when they come back. And I think about what a wonderful thing it is to be able to provide employment for people.
Yeah.
And we're in a college town, so the majority of our people we work with are college kids, and they're here for that short period of time while they're getting through school, and then we call it leaving the nest. They're going to leave the nest and go to their real job. So, it's a compliment when they come back. And then we have some people who are here. They're especially back of the house people where food is their craft. They're with us for the long haul, thank goodness. And that's getting tougher in this industry. It's really hard to find people to work in many cases. And so back to your question, it's been working with great people, but also great employees. And being in the hospitality business, you don't know, we are such a part of people's lives. They come in, you don't know, they could be celebrating something. They could be mourning something. We do a lot of people come in, maybe their a parent passes away, and they came in for so many years, and they're coming in because they just put their mom or dad to rest, and they want to come and celebrate that life. So it's just a gift to be able to share times. Food brings people together for so many reasons. And that's really what our big job. It's not just that we're a restaurant. We are with people during different periods of their lives. And that's real cool. It's very cool.
It is really cool. And particularly, I think, those. Well, I want to ask you about that. So tell me about the independent restaurant. And there are, chain restaurants as competition have a lot of resources and scale and so forth. But I have some thoughts. But tell me your thoughts on the advantages that independent restaurants have.
Well, I think because we can personalize everything. And when we bring new hires on, part of when I'm talking with them, part of what I tell them is, we have our quote unquote policies or our procedures, but we don't have to be so black and white. If if someone's got something, maybe your policy is, you get time off after X amount of time. But you know what? When you're independent, if someone has a struggle in their life and they need time or whatever, you could make that exception. Or, one of the things industry-wide we struggle with is chemical and alcohol abuse. It's just native to our industry.
Yeah.
And some of the most talented people and in all areas of the restaurant, but it seems to really hit the back of the house. If they're struggling with this drug or alcohol addiction and all of a sudden they can't come to work, it's not with us. We try to do what we can to help them get a leg back, because if you do black and white, no rules are rules, 3 strikes you're out, that person has nothing.
Right. Right.
You got to be flexible. So that, I think, is our biggest advantage, is that we try to humanize it more, have conversations and talk to the person and say, what is it that you need? What can we do? But then we're going to expect it. You're not a number, but if you're going to say you're going to do something, then you got to do it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, tell me a little bit more about that challenge of particularly back of the house, but you mentioned just finding people is so hard these days. What's going on, and what are you doing about that?
Well, it's a challenge that really hits our industry. I was just at a restaurant board meeting, and that was one of the things that across the state, it's just hard. And I mean, there are literally restaurants, independents, that are closing because they can't find people to work. So in Wisconsin, the good news is the unemployment is, under 3%, but the bad news is the unemployment's under 3%. So, we're just trying to stay the course and make our places a better place to work. And word of mouth is the best way to recruit the best people, and then just retain them. But it's tough. Our society is changing. I see it. Our son is, just graduated from high school. He's getting ready to go off to college, and he's in sports. And I see kids in that age group, their job is to stay in school, get great grades, and if they're athletes, hopefully get a scholarship or whatever. I mean, their job, and even if they're not athletes, their job is to stay focused and, keep those grades up so they can get some scholarships and get a better life, quote unquote. And so less people are working. They're just not. That's part of it.
Oh, so fewer of the college students are actually employed, is what you're saying. So, which is your employment base. Yeah.
Right. And okay. I think also from an industry standpoint, we have to go back to educating our young people about what a cool work experience being in a restaurant is. Mm-hmm. My favorite person to bring in is that 16 or 17-year-old or even younger. Start them out, doing prep. We get rid of you're a dishwasher, you're not a dishwasher, because there's some connotation to that. You're prep. You start out at prep.
Right.
And you might be doing dishes most of the time, but we're going to teach you how to peel a carrot and start to work your way up. And when you see that people that get that passion for cooking and then they want to try this, and then pretty soon you teach them how to saute, and you could just go. That's the coolest thing. So that's the ideal. But there are fewer people in that age group, I think, that are looking for work.
Yeah. Because,
they're focusing on their studies and they want to go to college. And I think there's nothing wrong with the trades,
Yeah.
It's a wonderful life, but I understand why parents are thinking that might be the best decision and just don't encourage their kids to work.
Yeah, there's a lot of people graduating from these colleges with a whole lot of debt, and
exactly. I hear you.
Then your options are really limited. I mean, there's over $1 trillion in student loan debt right now, which is very concerning. To me, I always feel like I've got 3 kids. My oldest is only 14, but I just feel like particularly the independent restaurant is such a great place to work when you're young. And to me, I would just say, gosh, you've got there's such an opportunity. I mean, somebody comes in there. I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I would just think if somebody comes in there, really puts their heart and soul into it, gives you everything they've got, wants to learn, wants to grow, they're going to have so many opportunities because you're not static. You've opened multiple places. Your business is growing. You'll probably continue to grow it. There's going to be lots of opportunities for people that want it to grow within the business. And
right.
what a great place to do that and to,
Yeah, I agree. You learn respect. You learn, how to keep an obligation. You got to show up and, you got to play nice with everybody. You learn how to work with different personalities. I totally agree. It's just hard or they get a taste. They want to be, I think the passion of cooking is something that, maybe because we're in the Midwest, I hope that grows. I see a little bit of a decline, but maybe it's just because they're not looking for the right thing. They're thinking about how much am I going to make instead of am I doing something I enjoy, because the money comes when you do something you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. And when you work really hard at something and you show up and you're consistent and reliable and eager and so forth, you'll be successful. And that's true in whatever you do. But it sounds like, I'm hearing this so much, it sounds like the industry really has to think about how, doing what you're talking about at a local level there, but how does the industry needs to educate people that there's really great opportunities in restaurants that are unfilled and can lead to lots of success and happiness and good income and good lifestyle and so forth. If you're it's unfortunate.
I agree. I think that the industry should do a campaign that just goes back to not glamorizing the restaurant business, but showing that there are positives, and so it is a glamorous business in some respects. Yeah, it's pretty cool to take. I love any busy night when you go back in the kitchen and you got a person with talent who's taking raw ingredients and making something and someone takes a bite out of it and goes, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." Now, how amazing is that to be able to do that? But sometimes we focus too much on, it's a lot of work and it's you know what? There's some cool stuff about it. At the end of the night, when you're exhausted and you did a good job, and you get immediate feedback in our business. You don't have to look at the numbers to know if you did a good job or you messed up. From a customer service standpoint, or if you had got in the weeds and you just couldn't pull it off, or you got behind or whatever, before you look at the numbers,
For sure. Well, the industry does. It would be great if the industry could do that, because there's also a lot of people that are, a lot more these days. I don't know the statistics, but I know enough, I've read enough or seen enough to know this is a alarming trend in some ways, is people that are getting out of college and then they're going back and home and living with mom and dad and having a hard time finding work. Like, what in the world? Why would you rather do that than go? I don't know. It's interesting. But that's the other thing too. I think, Joanne, you think if you go to college and you get a degree, I could see why people would say, well, that's a backslide to go work in a restaurant. Like, I don't want to do that. I went to college. I earned a good job. I just need to find the good job or whatever. But
yeah, yes and no. But luckily there are some people, I have a couple of key people who went off to college. One of my longtime wonderful people, and he's just become a great friend over the years because we've worked together. He wanted to go to school in California and do the whole computer thing, and he did. He came back, he worked a little bit, he went back to school, and then he came back, and then he ended up working a year in his field and hated it. So now he's back.
Kind of like you in the accounting, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's like, luckily there are a few people, but that's part of our culture. We got to stop telling people they need a 4-year degree in order to be something.
Totally agree.
And you're right about the debt. We, talked about that with our son. It's like, just do something you love. And everyone's like, well, why don't you make him work in the restaurant? Isn't he going to take everything over? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell him that. If he decides that, wonderful. But I'm certainly not going to tell him that's his, because he will figure it out.
Yeah.
But he has to figure it out.
Yep. No, you're right though. We're telling everybody, that's the thing these days where you have to go to. You really don't. Actually, there's so many opportunities if you
Right.
don't, if you've got the wherewithal to, take some risk and go try something different. But let me ask you this. What advice? And I'm going to let you roll here because I know you're busy and you got a trip coming up. But what advice do you typically give to people that are aspiring restaurant owners or new restaurant owners that you speak to, and what are the things you tell them, are just critical to the business, and just any general advice you might give folks?
Well, I tell them to do their research. You might have an idea that you think is fabulous, but you got to really check out the area, make sure you know what your competition's doing, and don't think you're going to be successful just because you got a great, recipe for whatever it is, and all your friends and family are going to come and keep you in business. Whatever money you think you need to get this going, you better triple it at least.
Okay,
And
that's really good advice.
And then my standby, and this is for anybody in business, not just restaurants, but follow your 4 a.m. voice. I always say that. If you wake up at 4 a.m. and you've got this, pang and it's like dread, that's different from waking up at 4 a.m. and you can't sleep because you are so excited to get this done.
Mm.
And you just know, apparently I got a lot of advice. And then be careful about who you take advice from, because some people will give you advice, but they've never been in your shoes. So you got to filter the advice and make sure it's relevant and that you're getting it from somebody who's been there and really is giving you, because some people, not that they don't have good motives, but they think they know it all.
Right.
And they've never done it.
Right.
Or this is their taste, and they think you need, like a pizza. Oh, you better have a deep dish pizza. But if everyone's into thin crust, that's not going to be such a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Filter it.
Okay, that's really good advice. Let me ask you one more thing though, because you mentioned have 3 times as much money as you think you need, which is really awesome because that gives you cushion and margin and room for error and so forth, which then leads to the fact that a lot of folks have to raise money to start a business. What have you seen? What things have you seen go awry when people have raised money, and what have you seen work really well in terms of finding investors? I don't know, anything, debt to equity, just things like any advice you'd give folks. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that over the years.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the operation and where people are.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to be really careful because you don't want to get your debt to equity too high, like where you're just strapped. That's just not fun. I would say the best thing is to start small and grow. We have a couple of former employees who opened their own place locally about a year ago. They just celebrated their 1-year mark, and they have done a phenomenal job, and they started out super, super small. But they were very careful about not going into too much debt, and they've worked themselves to a place where they're busting at the seams, and that's a good place to be. Go tiptoe through it. And as far as partners and all of that, I would just caution, just if you're going to partner with anybody and if they're just going to finance you, be silent or be involved, just be really, really careful to make sure you're compatible and that you really have everything completely outlined. Everybody knows the expectation, if this, then that, that's super important, because I can almost guarantee you if you haven't covered it in terms of contingencies and issues, it's going to pop up. So much better to have it figured out ahead of time and say, well, remember we discussed this, than to go, well, wait, we need to talk. This is an issue. And that goes with anything.
Yeah, have the patience to take your time and think through those things on the front end versus we'll figure that out later, I guess.
Exactly,
Like,
because
what if this happens? What if that happens? Like you really
right,
have to take the time to think that through on the front end so that you're ready for it, right?
right. And if you're in a situation where, you're leasing space, make sure you negotiate, understand that you can negotiate, understand, we own all of our properties, so we don't run into that, but I see that from you know, other restaurateurs. They just get in, their rent is out of whack. They just think they're going to do better. Paper is good. You got to have your projections, but what if it's not that? It's going to take you time. You don't just open up your doors and, people flood in. It takes a good 2-3 years to get your stride.
Really get going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep your overhead operating expenses, everything as low as possible, maybe used equipment, things like that. That's the other thing. A lot of folks feel like you've got to have everything's got to be nice and new, and that's expensive. All of a sudden, out of the gate, you're in the hole.
Yep. Very expensive.
Yeah, better to be creative and buy things when it's an absolute, like you said, like when they're busting at the seams, that's when you go, okay, now we need to put some money back into this, upgrade or whatever. But wait till then, right? Don't assume you're busting at the seams. Yeah, right.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a need. You need to have a little humility, I think, on the front end, I guess.
No kidding. Yeah.
Confidence, but humility. Well, follow your 4 a.m. voice. I really like that. That's a great piece of advice for anybody in any business. I really, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'll let you go. I know you got to drive ahead of you, but I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And it's fantastic advice, and just enjoy the conversation a lot, and appreciate the business, and just
thank you. Will.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it as well. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.